Welcome back to the Have Not Room. I am Ben. I'm joined here as always by Chad and Brian, and we are here to talk about Week 6 of Big Brother 23. And this is the first week of jury and first week of our new high roller room twist. So there's a lot to talk about, a lot of drama that's kind of popped off in the last week or so that we can go over. But first, Brian, you were off last week, so as we go over Christian's eviction, do you have anything from last week that you want to bring up here?
No, not really. I mean, not too surprising to see Christian as probably the predominant physical threat outside of the Cookout Alliance got, even though it was, of course, Derek X's plan, it certainly had influence and helped the Cookout quite a bit. So, not that surprising. It did at least give us a fairly entertaining episode on Thursday, where it looks like the votes could flip. They ultimately did not flip, but at least we had some drama.
Yeah, no, and while we were recording last week's podcast, the vote was in the process of potentially flipping, which was very chaotic. And yeah, on the Thursday episode, we saw a little bit of the that chaos and some of the clips from Bodyguard Gate, which is what it's been called online, when Big Dianaza came up to cock block Tiffany's conversation with Britni. Because that was something that was the feeds had cut during that for like 20 to 30 minutes. So, what were your thoughts on seeing that all play out in the episode there, Chad?
Yeah, it was chaotic as hell. I wish I got to watch it all in feeds, but as you said, we were recording at the time. But no, I mean, there was like legitimate moments where I'm like, oh my god, Christian's gonna stay, like for sure. And then like the next minute, someone would say something like that would remotely tip Tiffany the other way, and then Tiffany would just try to run the house back in the other direction. But it reminds me of like what was it, BB Can, like week 2, BB Can 9. It was just like craziness all the time. But no, I mean that was awesome to see. But I mean, come on, how does Christian not go there?
Yeah, I mean, I gotta hand it to Christian. He definitely, so far, has been the person, like the evicted house guest, who has fought the hardest to stay, and definitely got the closest to flipping the vote, in a situation where he should not have really had any realistic chance of staying, and surviving that sort of a backdoor. But, in the case of like a few different conversations happening, in like a few different orders, people like not kind of catching wind of it fast enough. Like the vote, like there are definitely universes where the vote actually flips and Christian
Yeah.
stays in the house. So, but yeah, it's ended up not happening. Sarah Beth ends up staying, and we head into our next HOH comp, which is a pretty classic knockout style comp where you have to figure out what type of competition a song refers to. It's a pretty classic standard memory style competition. Brian, do you have any takeaways from this comp? Because this comp is gonna seed a lot of the drama for the first half of this week.
Yeah, so Kyland claims that he wanted to throw this competition, which
He
is fine.
claims it. Yeah.
Which is fine. I think it probably would be good for him to throw the competition. However, he also kind of pretty aggressively goes for the win at times, it seems. And then at the very end, Tiffany hits the wrong button and she loses. And Kylan's like, oh no, I didn't want to lose. This sucks. But this competition is pretty easy to lose if you want to lose, especially if you know the answers, which he seemed to. So I don't know if I necessarily buy that he didn't want to win this one. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, go ahead, Chad.
yeah. Sorry,
That's
it's
all right.
it's it's tough to say like he threw that because he was like lightning fast with all these answers. I mean, I guess you can make an argument that he wanted certain people not to be HOH, so he beat them. But like he also didn't have a choice. Like, hey, I'm going to face you now. But I mean, if Tiffany won that HOH, is that what Kylan would have wanted? Like, who knows? But it's tough. I mean, if he's saying he threw it, then I don't know. I think it's a coin flip whether you actually believe it or not. But I mean, never bad to win an HOH, but he didn't really need to. So.
Oh, I don't know. I think Kylan's showing sometimes it's bad to win an HOH.
Well, okay, it's not bad to win an HOH. This is the same like conversation and argument that's had about winning the first HOH every season. Where it's like, up until like maybe 5 years ago, the general repeated mantra was it's bad to win the first HOH. It's bad to win the first HOH, even though like statistically, it's actually very good to win the first HOH as long as you're not like a completely incompetent player, right? You see like a number, like there's a huge overlap in first HOHs and winners. It's something like 30 to 40% of first HOHs go on to win the season. Obviously, as we saw with this season being a counterexample, if you're horrible at Big Brother and you're the first HOH, it does nothing for you, as we saw with Frenchie. But in my opinion, and I said this over text as well to you guys, I think that at this point in modern Big Brother, winning competitions is good as long as you can translate that power into social capital and not, become really big-headed with your power and like wield it irresponsibly and piss everybody off, which is what Kyland has been doing.
Yeah, I think winning HOH is half of the battle of being HOH.
Yeah.
It's the rest of it that really matters. And I don't know, man. I like Kylan a lot. I think he's a really nice, cool dude. But God, he is not a great Big Brother player in this week, anyways.
Yeah, I mean, looking at this competition, this is, as I said, this is going to seed the drama for the start of the week. Kylan's main two issues here are his handling of Azah and then his, as you mentioned, kind of passive half-throwing of that final round, where he selected Azah to play 2 or 3 times and then ended up facing her in the final 4 of the competition, where she asked him to throw it to her. He kind of like tepidly nodded along in kind of like a Derek X agreeing to Xavier sort of way, and then slammed the button like 3/4 of a second into the song starting.
Yeah.
And eliminated her. So not a great look. Azah is going to be very pissed off about this, and then obviously he claims to have wanted to throw the final round to Tiffany, but as you said, he did this by letting her answer, and her answer incorrectly, rather than him just answering incorrectly himself.
Yeah. He's saying,
know.
like, don't make me look foolish. I guess that meant, like, don't make me, like, throw it and get it wrong. Mm-hmm. But, I don't know.
Yeah. As is mandatory with the cookout for the last week or two, there's been a lot of very bad communication issues that were represented pretty heavily in this competition and then into this week. But yeah, so we see on the Sunday night episode, ahead of the nominations, one of the primary conversations it's shown is this confrontation between Azah and Kyland. Do you have any thoughts on that conversation, Chad? They really edited this down. This conversation went on for like 1 to 2 hours in the feeds. But yeah, Azah was very, very upset and definitely did not mince her words.
Yeah, it was very cringe watching Kylan just kind of have to take all that and just be like, well, I'm sorry. But, I mean, like, was there agreement before the competition that he was going to throw it to her? Or was it just like, hey, we're up on the podiums together, throw it to me right now? Like, because if there was a prior conversation, it'd be one thing. But if it was in the moment, like, I could see how you would not just be like, yeah, sure, here you go. And, I mean, if she wanted to win it, like, she should have just answered faster. But I don't know. I get why she's mad. It's one that Kylan did not need to win at all, and probably would have been better if he just let Azah win, because he's probably safe. and Ozzo's already on the outs with, Tiffany to some degree, and I think they mended things, at least for now. So let her get some blood in her hands or have a terrible HOH because, I mean, as of now, she's proving not to be a great Big Brother player. I mean, she definitely plays more with her heart than strategically, like 90% to 10. but I don't know. It's tough watching my guy Kyland have a rough week.
Yeah.
It's true.
I do think that part of Oz's game though has improved marginally, at least in the
Yeah.
last week or two, in terms of like her kind of being self-aware of like, I've been playing emotionally. I need to be more proactive in like actively not letting my emotions guide my decision making. And I think that she has taken a more rational approach recently. She's been more open to like conversations with Chada, for instance, who she had
Yeah.
barely considered a part of the cookout, 2 to 3 weeks ago. But yeah, it's not super great in terms of like starting your HOH with like half of the alliance pissed off at you. And when you say like, was there an agreement for him to throw it to Azza? Not really, but there was an understanding among the cookout that, like, for the second week in a row now, the primary target heading into this week was going to be SB. And because of that, Kyland is basically the one person in the cookout who can't, like, realistically target SB and, like, get away with it. And so it definitely, with that kind of understanding in mind, and with, like, Kyland kind of coming into this comp with the expectation that he would throw it to another cookout member if possible, it definitely came off as like very selfish for the other members of the cookout, for like Kylan to go out of his way to win this. As it definitely came off like, oh, he's just winning this because he wants to protect SB this week. And that's there's going to be a lot of the strategy in this week and then into the future weeks of the cookout members kind of very like almost overplaying in terms of making the rest of the cookout feel like they consider their parachute expendable. Like, we'll see a lot of Chada like heavily throwing Derek Hex under the bus and being like, oh, Derek Hex has to go soon. And Tiffany kind of playing like this duality thing where she's simultaneously trying to save Claire this week while simultaneously being like, oh yeah, Claire is expendable to me. She can just go next week. I don't care. Because they're all very cognizant of not looking like they're choosing their parachute over the cookout, or like putting their parachutes, life in the game over the success of the cookout. And so I feel like that's like their fundamental ground issue that all of the other issues of Highland Age is built on. I don't know what your thoughts on that are, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. And I think it kind of plays more just like into what the cookout is playing for at the end of the day. We talked about this offline, and I mean, it's been plenty of things. They're playing for something bigger than their individual games. So I think it's always like they want to be like, look, I'm with the cookout. This is my main goal. I can get rid of Claire. I can get rid of Derek. Like, it's fine. Which is like makes it a little hard to talk about their actual minute-to-minute gameplay or their long-term gameplay in terms of like how we would a normal season, where we kind of look at each player, what's their individually most selfish and self-interested move that benefits them, whereas they're playing for more than just like a regular Big Brother season. So I think even they are trying to figure out how to best navigate this in their own personal games. Does that make sense? Did that make any sense?
Yeah, no, for sure. We kind of like brought this up over text as well, where like assuming the status quo stays as is, and these powers don't like seriously shake things up and like dislodge the cookout completely or anything like that, and the Cookout stays true to each other until the final 7, final 6, the most likely winner at this point is like by far Xavier. Xavier has everybody wanting him in their endgame plans for the most part, except for Tiffany, which we'll talk about now. He is like definitely the most level-headed, the most universally liked. He is probably the best competition, competitor within the Cookout Alliance headed into those late game comps. Because he's like strong and smart, so you look at the memory comps as well as the physical ones. He's like the most likely to win a jury vote. So like there's just so many things that are stacking up right now that make it look like Xavier is going to run away with this game. Which obviously for me, that makes me feel
fuck
good.
Yeah, let's go.
Like I picked Xavier to win with very confident. I was very confident in that pick in the preseason, so obviously that validates my decision a little bit. But
insert the Charlie, like, let's go.
Yeah, there is a little bit of a difference when we're talking about Xavier being the obvious front runner to benefit from the success of the Cookout Alliance versus looking at, for instance, last season, Cody being the most obvious primary benefactor of the committee alliance, where you look at somebody like Danny Briones, who we talked for like 3 or 4 weeks during that season, like, oh, Danny is at the bottom, she's like barely scraping by, she's like dodging bullets left and right that she doesn't even know are being shot at her. She's winning an HoH just on the whim of things, and a week where she otherwise would go home. And she was never in a position for the committee alliance to benefit her in any way long term. But she was still loyal to the alliance for like basically up until her eviction during the triple eviction.
Perhaps their most like loyal soldier at times.
Right. So yeah, it was probably like Danny and like Memphis, who also is somebody who is not going to ever benefit long term from the committee alliance. So like you have these people in this majority alliance that's just running things to the end, who are very obviously from the outside, and even if they had perfect information from the inside, not benefiting at all from the alliance outside of like, coasting to a mid-jury position, basically. And that exists also within the Cookout to an extent, but at least the Cookout has a greater reason besides just like blind loyalty to a random alliance for them to prioritize the success of the alliance over their individual success. So it's a lot easier to it's a lot more defensible at the very least, I would say.
Like we harped on Danny quite a bit last season, in a way that I don't think we will, for some of the players who are not going to benefit from the Cookout. Yeah. Just because it is a different situation. It is, like we said, it's a bigger than just the game of Big Brother. So, I mean, we'll probably we'll talk about this a lot as the season goes on, where it's like, this may not be the best move for this individual player, but it's the best for the Cookout and the best for, the players going forward, Yeah.
I think like a parallel to Danny in this season would be like Azza maybe, but I think even Azza probably has more late game potential than even Danny did. I think the Cookout as an alliance even is more like wide open in terms of the field than the committee ever was, because the structure of the committee was always very hierarchical below Cody, and then like you had like Enzo and Nicole Franzel like kind of like a 2-3, and then like they kind of branched. But the Cookout is very kind of split right now, primarily on like a male-female line at this point. And at this point, it's just mostly a projection of who's going to do the best in the competitions. And so, from my perspective, I think that Xavier is the most likely to do the best in the competitions combined with the social positioning. So that's just the reason why I would put him, up front. But, if there's a lot of memory comps and somebody like Chada goes on a streak of memory comps, like she could also easily win the season, right? Yeah.
That'd be exciting.
Yeah.
Just because she's been, not great in comps so far, and I think we talked about it when we were first talking about the game. She's so young that I do think sometimes, even though she's saying the right and very smart game reads, I don't know if all the players take her as seriously as if she was a little bit older. Does that kind of ring true to you guys?
Yeah. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Chad.
Yeah, a little bit. She feels a little, almost like she's being carried with the cookout. She's not. You don't see her being the one to lead the charge there. So it feels like the core members, the Tiffany's and kind of the Kylands, are kind of just dragging her along with them. I feel like she's underestimated a lot, and if we're late game and she rips off a comp or two, I feel like people are gonna be like, "Oh shit, why do we let her get this far?" If it's like final six, Cookout's final six, she has a good shot. She needs a couple comp wins to put herself up there with, Kyland at this point with comp wins, and I'm assuming that Xavier might win one or two too. So I think she'll probably go far, but worst case she gets pulled as a GOAT just to sit in final two with someone who really deserves it. But best case she positions herself well and then sits next to someone like Azza, who I think she can beat. But I don't know. I'm a little shaky on her late game. She has to do a lot to get something on her resume, because right now she's kind of just floating in Big Alliance to me.
Yeah. I think, how old is she? 21, 22?
He just turned. Well, 21 is the minimum you have to be to play Big Brother. But she turned 21 this year. She was born in the year 2000. She's the first Big Brother player born in the 2000s.
But okay. Yeah. I'm just gonna have to absorb that, deal with that.
Yeah.
This is where we are. But no, I get 5 years from now when they bring her back for her attorney season, she'll probably win Big Brother, because I do think she has the mind for it. I just think her biggest hurdle is being taken seriously, and it's not like they're intentionally disregarding her, but I think it's just a normal thing to kind of dismiss someone who's significantly younger than most of the rest of you.
I definitely think that was the case for the first 3 to 4 to 5 weeks of the game. That's the reason primarily why she was basically kind of kept at an arm's length from the rest of the cookout at first, because people didn't know if she was old enough to be mature enough to be trusted with information or anything like that. But I think the last week or so, she's gained a lot of respect, particularly compared to how the rest of the cookout has dealt with a lot of the drama that's come up. People like Big D and Tiffany and even Azza and Kyland, to an extent, have accelerated a lot of negative, putting the negative feelings out based off of the drama they've stirred themselves up to. And I think that she's basically second to Xavier right now in terms of who people within the cookout itself consider to be the most mature, which is ironic. And her and Xavier had a conversation about how it was ironic that she's 21 and she is more mature than some of these 30 to 40-year-olds. So I understand the worry that her age could be a factor in terms of people not respecting her, but I think she's at a point where that's become less and less of an issue. So I think by the end of the game, if she has a good run to the end, I don't think that'll really be a problem at that point.
Cool. Yeah. I guess do we want to talk about the most convoluted twist ever constructed?
Well, technically we have to nail down the nominations first, because in a very odd Sunday episode, usually the Sunday episode ends with the nominations. The nominations Sunday episode happened 25 minutes into the episode. And there was a lot of nonsense concerning these nominations that happened on feeds that was not conveyed extremely well on the episode just for time constraints. But the way that Kyland handled this HoH was he took a plastic like container lid, and he kind of created a diagram on that container lid to mirror the memory wall. And then he took a bunch of candies and cereal and used that candy and cereal as like point trackers for players in the house. And he had 90-second one-on-one conversations, or 90-second one-on-one conversations with each person, where he asked them like a bunch of speed round questions, like who's the who's in the most control in the house, who's the biggest goat in the house, who's the best pawn in the house, who would be your target if you were HOH, and he's just like using his like candy and cereal diagram to basically take notes on all of these conversations, and that's how he ran his HOH basically.
Okay, very interesting.
Yep.
Playing Moneyball, I guess.
Yeah, it sounds like the touchy subjects challenge.
Basically,
yeah. That's how he made his noms.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's how he claimed he made his noms. He already had decided on his noms, and this was the excuse basically, like, oh, I'm using this to gain information to inform my decision, when it was really just I'm using this to gain information for myself. And Azza, saw through this and did not play along at all. She basically did the I'm only here so I don't get fined routine.
Right.
Where she answered she answered basically no comment to all of his questions, except for who is the person who is controlling the game, and she answered Frenchie.
Oh, all right. Hey, he's finally getting his due.
Yeah.
Yeah. Big Brother player not in the house.
Yeah. So there you go. That's how Azza decided she was going to handle Kyland this week, because this was like hours after the HOH comp, so she was still very not happy with him. But yeah, that's how Kyland ran his HOH, was with a cereal and candy board of memory wall, and he basically came away from this with the information that everybody thought that either Tiffany or Xavier were running the game, which is pretty accurate. And so he decided before this even that his nominations were going to be Claire and Big D, with Claire as the target, and then possibility of having a Britni or Alyssa renom. So he pulls Big D aside at 4 o'clock in the morning. There's a lot of very late important conversations this season. And essentially asks him if he'll be a pawn. Big D agrees because he says that he would rather go on the block than Azza. And the way that they're going to play this off is Big D is going to pretend like him and Kyland got into a fight where he called Kyland a bunch of names and said he was like an asshole, and like he was like getting like super egotistical, and like I don't know. I can't remember the exact lie about the fight that they made up, but this is what Big D is going to run with and tell everybody, basically, is the reason that he ends up getting nominated. But yeah, so that's what we get. We get Claire and Big D on the block, and Claire is pretty surprised and shocked by this, as we see, because she didn't even consider this as an outside possibility at all. So what are your thoughts on all that? There's a lot of information and a lot of distraction there, but
yeah, it's a lot to get to those two noms. I guess I see why you would want to go for Claire. She's not in the cookout. She's pretty smart overall, and I feel like no one's going to be too upset if she goes home. She doesn't have that many allies in the house, at least from what we see in this episode. I know Tiffany really likes her and has her involved in Endgame, but outside of that, like, I don't think she's involved in many. So I guess maybe Kylan's thinking, try not to piss off too many people, but he's done the exact opposite. I mean, with Derek F, the episode made it seem like he volunteered for it and was very cool with it, which, I mean, which sounds like it's kind of accurate, which it's a good move on his part, I guess. I mean, you never want to be on the block, regardless. But, I mean, if the plan is get Claire out and maybe take Derek F off, then great. But it kind of depends on who he renoms at that point. Because with this house, they could flip 20 more times before they make a decision. So,
and they did.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, I think.
Are the noms the same now, or are we post veto? Two vetoes.
Well, this is pre the high roller twist. We still the high roller stuff, and then we have the veto stuff. Luckily, there's been very little movement since the veto, but there's a lot of movement leading up to the veto. Those are our nominees, and then we see on the second episode we get our high roller twist, and it was very confusing on Saturday trying to decipher what the hell was going on with this twist after the feeds had been down for like 7 hours. Eventually, we kind of got to a position where we basically understood how this twist was going to work and what the future powers were going to be. So they're each given their money, and they get to potentially spend 50 of it to play the Veto Derby competition, where they have to do the shuffleboard thing. The people who score points in the shuffleboard thing are given the opportunity to then bet on who they think will win the veto competition, and in order of finish, and the person who bets correctly in the veto competition will then win a second veto that is used first. So, any questions, Brian?
Yeah, why? Why do we need this? I mean, there have been way better, like, less convoluted twists. I mean, I think we're pretty plugged in to the Big Brother universe. And even for, like, Chad and I were talking before the show, it's like, this is a little confusing. Yeah. I don't know how people who are just, like, casually watching this show, like, keeping track of this. I have to say that they're probably just like, okay, just tell me what the end result of this is. I'm not going to try to, keep track of all this, bullshit. So, I don't know, Big Brother. This was a weird one.
Yeah. I mean, I thought coming into this high roller twist before I figured out how it worked that this had potential if it was executed well. Like the idea of America voting is like never something I'm super into, but in this case, America's not really voting for somebody to get a power. They're basically voting for somebody to get money that they can spend on powers. So it's like less bad. But this whole you have money to bet or to buy an entry fee into a competition where the competition determines your ability to create a scenario where you might win the power. Basically, it's like a 3-step thing. You have to win them. Or it's like 4 steps. You have to get the money from America, spend the money on the comp, play the comp, and then you have to have the result of the comp. Create the execution of the power in a way that favors you. So in this case, you have to bet correctly on the veto. In the roulette case, you have to use the roulette thing, and then the outcome is random. And then with the coin, you have to win the competition, and then you flip a coin. And there's a 50-50 chance that you spent $250 and won this competition for literally nothing.
Yeah. So they're basically just like, so, how do we do fire tokens but worse? Significantly.
It's crazy that you could make fire tokens a worse twist. But they figured it out.
Yep. Oh, man.
But yeah. So, Chad, we have 5 people decide to play this competition. The 3 of the 5 are relatively obvious. The HoH and the 2 nominees decide to spend $50 and play. And then on top of that, we have Kyland's number 1 ally, Sarah Beth, is told to play by Kyland. And then Tiffany, who is Claire's number 1 ally, is told not to play by Claire. And then she plays anyways.
I was trying to figure out why Tiffany would bother. I was trying to figure out why Sarah Beth would bother, but I guess if Kai told her to do it, it makes sense because that's Kai covering his ass. Like, oh, Sarah Beth won. Sorry, I can't get her out. But Tiffany, I mean, like, she has no reason to, but she's Tiffany. She's gonna go after everything and then epically fail with everything she's ever done in the Big Brother house, as we see with the buckets. That was awesome.
That was bad. That was really bad.
Oh, that was
pretty much the worst you could possibly do. Like,
I mean, this was not her episode.
Yeah. Yeah, not great. Not great in terms of the competitions, at the very least. And then obviously, like, her number 1 ally outside the cookout on the block. Definitely one of Tiffany's worst episodes. It was interesting because I knew that Tiffany played and got 0, but after they introduced the competition and how it worked, I was like, how do you get 0? Because I assumed from what they said on the feeds, I had assumed that they all went off the far edge, basically. Like the last 2 were like kind of teetering on the far edge, and then the last one hit into them, and they all 3 hobbled over. But like after whoever went first, Sarah Beth went first, and it became clear that they could barely get it halfway. I was like, wait, how did Tiffany not get at least a point? And we found out. Yeah.
Oh my god.
She did a 7-10 split, basically. Yeah.
And she got a 7-10 split, hit both pins, and got a gutter ball. So
yeah.
Good job.
Also, just flashbacks to Janelle losing this competition last season. Not great.
Yep.
Not what I wanted to be subjected to on my Sunday night. I already have the Sunday scaries. Don't want to have to think about that moment from last season. So all around bad.
Yeah. Also a bar themed. That one I think it was like mugs of beer, and this one's mint juleps. Same idea. Very creative competition design. But yeah, so we have those 5 people playing. Tiffany, unfortunately, ends up with 0 points and is excused from the second part of the of this twist. Basically throws away $50. And the other 4 finish in the order of Kyland first, Big D second, Claire third, and SB fourth. And so that is the order that they will be betting on the veto players. And so we get to the veto draw. This is very important, obviously, this week more than any. And the 3 players that are drawn are Azah, Britni, and Alyssa. So, not a great draw for the cookout. 2 out of the 4 remaining non-cookout members get drawn. And on top of that, this is a very good draw for people like the Jokers, essentially, to be safe. Because all 3 of them are playing in the veto. And on top of that, Big D is going to be betting as well. This is going to be very bad because the target is going to be shifting off of Claire and onto somebody else. Before we get there, let's quickly go through how much money everybody got, because this gets very quickly found out in the house. We have at the bottom, our bottom 5, Alyssa, Kyland, SB, Claire, and Azah are the bottom 5. They all get 50. And the next tier up is Chada, Xavier, and Tiffany. All get 75. And then the top tier, Big D, Derek X, and very relevant, Britni also gets $100, and it gets leaked quickly because she tells Azah. So once Xavier is the first one to basically figure out by process of elimination what everybody gets. Once the Cookout and Xavier become aware that the two, essentially of the top 6, 4 of the people in the top 6 are the Cookout, and there's 2 people in the top 6 who could potentially win these powerful powers in the next couple of weeks and dislodge their plans. Derek X and Britni. So Xavier and Tiffany, especially for obvious reasons, start to heavily push Britni as a possible alternative target for this week. So this is where we're headed into the veto betting, which is extremely important, obviously, because all 3 jokers are playing. There could be, there's going to be 2 vetoes potentially in play. So it's very important for this plan to go through, for Britni to be eligible to go on the block. So we have 4 people who are betting. Kyland bets on Alyssa. Big D bets on Britni, Claire bets on Kyland, and SB bets on Azza. So Claire and Big D have nobody betting on them. If they were to win the veto, there would be no second veto this week. It would go back into the pool for next week. Everybody caught up, because again, as we talked about, very fucking confusing twist, very hard to follow.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Cut to the veto comp. They know that it's OTEV. They're told ahead of time that it is OTEV because they are basically given that information to inform their bet. And they all start to strategize on how they can throw OTEV to the correct person. And in this case, Kyland wants Claire to win the veto at this point. He wants Claire to win the veto, so there's no second veto in play. Claire takes herself off the block, and he puts up Britni in her place. And then Big D would be the second best outcome, but I think a lot of people did not expect Big D to do great in OTEV, so they
how dare you?
prioritizing Claire as the most optimal outcome here. And the reason the Cookout wants the veto in play for next week is so that they have an additional out in the case of a non-Cookout member winning HoH, basically.
Right.
All
right. So, cut to OTEV. Another instance where we have Kyland playing in a competition and doing the absolute worst possible thing he can do to make himself look sus. Because Claire ends up betting on Kyland, presumably because she has lost a lot of trust in him, and she doesn't think that he would use the veto on her, so she's basically hedging her bets there. So the OTEP competition comes down to a final 2 of Kyland versus Alyssa. So Kyland had bet on Alyssa, so in this final 2, Kyland has a veto guaranteed no matter what. And essentially this is determining who gets a second veto between Alyssa and Claire.
Right.
Kyland decides that the best way for me to regain Claire's trust is to blatantly throw this veto to Alyssa.
Oh boy.
Thoughts, Chad?
I don't know why. She wanted her to trust, take her off the block. Say it was a backdoor plan all along, but I mean, I'm still confused, like, on how this all works to begin with. But I mean, I kind of get it, but I don't know, man. Kyland just is misplaying comps this entire week, and it's a very bad look. But no, I don't get why he would do that. That makes no sense.
All right, so yeah, just to make sure we get this laid out. Kyland bet on Alyssa, Claire bet on Kyland. So if Kyland wins the competition, Claire gets a second veto. If Alyssa wins the competition, Kyland gets a second veto. So Kyland has the veto no matter what. So he's essentially deciding in that moment, I'm going to give the second veto to Alyssa instead of Claire because this will earn Claire's trust. And the logic in his brain is, I want to be the one to use my veto on Claire to be the one to pull her off the block myself. Does that change any of the decision making or logic for you, Brian?
No, I mean, because if he wins, he only has one veto. Well, no. Well, okay, so Claire will have the veto.
If he wins.
I guess I can give Kylan a little bit of credit because it's all in his hands to show Claire, like, no, I am taking you off. But it doesn't matter, right? Do you think it matters that much to Claire whether or not she takes herself off or Kylan takes her off?
At this point, after he's nominated her already, and then also is basically going out of his way to throw a comp to make sure she doesn't get the veto, doesn't look great. You know, you're basically like taking 2 steps back so you can take 1 step forward. Mm-hmm. At least that's how I'm thinking about it, but I don't know. That's where we're at after the veto comp. The Jokers had all of these opportunities to win 2 vetoes, and they come out with 0.
Typical Jokers, man.
Yeah. And it comes to light that Ozza actually also threw HoH.
Oh, boy.
What?
So, basically, the logic here is Sarah Beth bet on Ozza, right? So,
Sure.
In Oz's mind, the optimal backdoor option is Sarah Beth, but that's not going to ever happen regardless with Kyland as the HoH. So if she ends up winning the veto and Sarah Beth gets the second one, if Sarah Beth vetoes Claire, as Kyland would instruct her to do, so that Kyland can backdoor Britni, or renom Britni, Ozza would then have her opportunity to then use her veto to just veto Britni. And now Britni is safe, Ozza is safe because she has the veto, and Kyland's hand is basically forced to put up Alyssa by default, or Derek X potentially, whose name also gets bandied about a lot this week. So in that situation, they're good. And if Sarah Beth basically calls the bluff and doesn't use the veto, then Ozza then gets the second veto, and she also would then keep the noms the same and say, screw you, Kyland, we'll just send Claire home. So she still has all the power as the second person to use the veto either way. So the logic here also makes sense. A lot of people throwing this comp when it strategically is not making sense. And this comes back to something I said earlier in the podcast, all right? Throwing comps is a little bit overrated, I'll say it, okay? Everyone loves throwing comps. Everyone looks to be the genius who comes in and is like, oh, I'm going to throw all the competition. I'm going to be Dr. Well, all right? This is not BB2. This is not BB7. This is BB23, okay? Winning competitions is good. I'll say it, okay? I'll be the bad guy who has to admit it. Okay? Winning competitions is good. All right, let's look at the past winners of Big Brother, all right? Let's look at Cody Calfiore, won a fuckload of competitions. Jackson Mickey won a fuckload of competitions. Casey Clark won a fuckload of competitions. So you think you see a pattern here? Winning competitions is good. Stop throwing competitions when you have no strategic reason to do so.
But
it's just an excuse,
won
Benny.
a shit ton of competitions and lost. So
it's an easy out.
Oh my god.
It's an easy out.
Twice in a row.
Yeah. It was definitely the competition wins were the reason that he lost those 2 jury votes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh. Yeah. Love Paul.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Oh my god.
Gee, that was my first Benny blow up. I like it.
I'm just sick because like this is like where we've reached a point in like Big Brother fandom where there's all these kind of like pseudo intellectual takes based off of like this kind of idealized view of like perfect strategy, but like in practice, throwing comps is like usually wrong. Like there are things like Xavier this season has done a good job of throwing comps in situations where it has made sense. But he's also won an HoH, and he had an effective HoH that week, and that was able to solidify a lot of his relationships. So, like, there are just situations, right? Like, and obviously also, you know, shout on Kyland for not throwing the HoH comp. So, like, it's very situational. But I do think there is kind of a knee-jerk reaction by a lot of people and a lot of players and a lot of fans to think that throwing comps is like the default correct thing to do, when in my opinion it's the opposite, where the default correct thing to do is to win the competitions, and there are corner cases where throwing is correct.
Yeah.
I agree.
I've talked a lot though, so before we get to the veto and the likely result of this week, heading into next week, do you guys have anything else you want to say about high roller stuff, any of the veto nonsense?
I just will be glad to see this be over. I will say I'm interested to see if, because there's one that's very similar, if not the same, as the coup d'etat. I'm very interested to see if that does get unleashed and how that affects the, yeah, right. So we'll see that, because I did not watch BB11 live. That was before my Big Brother time, and I have to imagine that was a pretty exciting moment when Jeff whipped out the coup d'etat or whatever he called it, and got rid of Jesse. But spoilers for BB11 from a decade ago. But I'd like to see something like that, in my live Big Brother watching.
You also didn't see BB Cam 3 live,
Right.
where Britni had
coup d'etat.
Yeah, there was a coup d'etat in that as well.
That just sounds exciting.
Yeah, it was a very late game coup d'etat as well. It was like final 6 or 7, I think.
Oh boy.
So it was very poorly received by many people, even though it was wielded by a fan favorite. But yeah, I mean, there's a 50-50 chance, right? We'll see a coup d'etat this season, assuming that we're not, predicting that it'll be a rigged coin. But yeah, okay, so we kind of preface this. Obviously, Alyssa or Kyland uses the veto first. He gets the option first because he has the second veto. Obviously, the second veto goes first. And he takes Claire off of the block as promised, puts Britni up in her place. Alyssa comes in with her second veto and decides not to use it. So the nominees at the end of the veto ceremony are Big D and Britni. And we cut to feeds coming back, and wouldn't you know it, Britni is not super happy.
Yeah, so not surprising.
Yeah, you could say she is distraught. A lot of statistics being thrown around of I've spent 78% of the season on the block or whatever it was.
Someone's got to do it. I don't know what to say. I mean, someone every season, right? Someone just gets put as the pawn, and I saw a lot of people. It's mean, but it is funny. It's like, well, you don't have to worry about that again.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I mean, as is pretty standard with the season, the second the veto ceremony ended, the rest of the week is basically locked in place. Even more so this week. Britni will be leaving unless some insane shit happens. Which there's a theoretical, very, very slim.
No, I'm not even going to entertain the notion that.
At the very least, we have to entertain it because it's at least relevant towards next week.
Okay.
The cookout has the numbers. There are 4 cookout members voting. It's an 8-person vote. So worst case scenario, even if some sort of flip is attempted to be manufactured, a worst case scenario would be a 4-4 vote with Kyland breaking the tie, assuming the cookout is loyal to Big D, which they have no intention to not be loyal to him at this point. And Britni will be our first jury member. But there are a couple of people who do not think it is in their best interest for Britni to leave this week. Chief among them is the one person in this game who has been openly vocalizing that they would like to target Big D for a couple of weeks now. And we know who that person is, right?
I have no idea.
No? I thought we talked about this. No? That person is Claire.
Oh, why? Why Big D of all people?
So Claire's logic is basically that she sees Big D as a goat, which is correct. The cookout also sees Big D as a goat. And she does not want to have him basically dragged along to the end and take a final 2 seat away from potentially her. And, if she gets out Big D, it kind of blows up a lot of people's, it basically creates a lot more endgame scenarios in Claire's mind, of course, where she could maneuver. That's the logic there. I think it's reasonable logic with the information that Claire has. Because she has good relationships with most of the people in the house besides Big D. So Claire is going to be leading the attempt to flip this vote. She even started doing this before the veto ceremony, which is relevant because it could have been very bad if that got to the wrong people. And it could have got to the wrong people because she started doing this campaign to Chada and Tiffany. So yeah, she's going to primarily be talking to Derek X about this. She's going to be convincing Derek X that it is correct for Britni to stay for their game. And she's going to be attempting to make these same arguments to people like Tiffany and Chada, who obviously are not ever going to go along with this because of the cookout. And they're going to be pushing back heavily on this with the argument of, we do not want to piss off Kyland as the HoH. Kyland as the HoH wants Britni to go. We do not want to disrespect him and basically lose his loyalty, because as we talked about before, Kyland is within the alliance that Claire and Derek X think is real. Kyland is basically like the fifth in that alliance. So even though he's done a lot of shady shit this week and nominated Claire and been very, very vague about his intentions and not really given any information away to his allies, that is still the intended fake real alliance. So that's where we're at there. And predictably, this has caused the target, which had previously been on Sarah Beth or potentially Derek X headed into next week, to now shift again to Claire.
That sucks. For us. That's,
Yeah.
Claire fans, But, I mean, I cannot harp on Claire too much. There's stuff happening that there's no way she can know about. She's not playing with full information and she's not, it's not like she's missing out on a particularly obvious alliance, which would be a different thing. It's just like there are players navigating around her and she just can't know everything that's happening, and so she's probably making the best decisions with the information she has. It's just that we as viewers know that it's not going to work out.
Yeah. And we do see this week, Derek X and Claire do start to have very kind of half jokey conversations where they're joking about how the first 5 and now likely 6 evictees are all white. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's pretty funny. They're not going to send Mia, Claire says, they're not going to send Mia out next because they don't want to send the last white person out next. I
don't think they care.
And they kind of reference what, they reference the idea of what the cookout is, in passing. And Derek X is like, oh well, man, if that's actually happening, then kudos to them because
they're doing a good job.
They're they look like they hate each other. That would be crazy. I don't know how serious they're considering this as a possibility. It definitely came off as kind of oh wow, wouldn't that be bonkers if that were happening?
It would, right?
But this is enough, right? This is Tiffany and Chada are aware that this is conversations that they're kind of having with each other. This is thoughts that are in their head. And so they're very scared that, that Claire / Derek X will be the one to figure it out and basically ruin the Cookout's plans at this point. So
Yeah.
Sarah Beth survived 2 weeks where she came into the week as the primary target, and it looks like she has survived long enough where she won't be a target for the foreseeable future, at least the next 2 or so weeks.
I'd say she'll probably get out on the double eviction, but that's fine.
Yeah. So yeah, any thoughts on what we're kind of seeing here, Chad? And like, do you have any predictions, I guess, on what we're going to kind of see? Because like, there's a lot of things that are up in the air in the next couple of weeks between the Cookouts, plans, and these powers and everything.
Yeah, I think, if a power goes the wrong way, the Cookout's just going to crumble, and then Davis is going to keep it together by like a string. But I think as we get closer, like if we're like final 8 and 6 Cookout members, or even final 9, you're going to see them really start to hang that parachute and be like, hey, I really, like it's great that we're final 6 most likely, but like I want to win. And I think that's where Kyland kind of is thinking, and that he's protecting Sarah Beth because Sarah Beth's, probably going to vote for him as a jury vote. So he wants to take her far regardless. And I don't know. I see a lot of infighting in the future. I mean, it's already happened now. But,
it's already happening, yeah.
Yeah, but as we're like, if they make final 6, even if it's like 4 of them at least, it's going to be a lot of like, I have a real shot to win, $750,000. I mean, the goal obviously means a lot more than, just I won Big Brother or money. But I don't know, man. I think, if you're sitting a couple days away from a, $750 million, I mean, $1,000. Oh my God.
$750 million. That'd be a whole different can of worms.
No Cookout if there was $750 million. I don't know. That's a lot of money. That's a little bit different.
I think you're going to see people start to backstab because regardless, more than likely a Cookout member is going to win at this point. It's just a matter of, I want it to be me. No, I want it to be me. I'm more deserving. So I think we're right on the cusp of it. Another couple weeks, forget it. Cookout's going to be in shambles. But they're still going to vote for one of the members to win. So they got their goal.
Yeah, I think at this point, like a Cookout member is almost guaranteed to win.
Yeah.
Like I don't see a scenario where not one of them, at the very least, gets to the final 2.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out on the back end. Like we've been talking about it a lot. Like Xavier is going to comp out, but maybe not. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe he goes out the very first week in 6th place, and then who knows? So we'll see. Probably not my winner pick's going to win, but he might be in the final 2. It's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like all three of our winner picks are in the Cookout. So, like, at this point, if we're assuming a Cookout member wins, if we assume perfectly that they all have this even shot, which is not the case, obviously, but then we basically have 50% chance of getting the winner, right?
Just like BB Can 9.
Yeah.
And then went out all in order.
But in BB Can 9, I called with 3 people who had a chance to win the season, and somebody didn't necessarily subscribe to that. But obviously, obviously you ended up still picking the person who went the furthest of the 3 of us. So he had the last laugh. But
oh man.
But yeah. And yeah, I mean, we'll probably. I'm sure Chada will probably win the season, and then the 3 of us will be like, "God damn it, we're so close."
We just thought she was too young. Fuck.
Yeah.
I should have known Devon and Vanessa, my 2 favorite players, are hers.
Yeah.
Should have just gone with it.
Yeah. Yeah, or even like Tiffany as well. But yeah, I don't know. I do think there are still some outs for the Cookout to lose. It's very marginal. And I think it has to come off of the back of a Derek X or Claire HoH this week. I think this is kind of the last exit ramp for the Cookout to lose the game. And I think if neither of the 2 of them win the HOH that's happening in 2 days. I could pretty confidently say 100% a cookout member is going to win. But if a Claire or Derek X HOH happens, and they are like, oh, whoops, Xavier and Kyland are on the block. How did this happen? Or Big D and Kyland, or Big D and Xavier are on the block. Whoops, how did this happen? What a conundrum. Then we'll probably end up with a scenario where one of them gets randomly taken off of the block, and then, one of the 3 non-cookout members left off gets randomly selected, gets thrown back up on the block, and the whole thing is a wash anyways, so...
Yeah, sorry, Sarah Beth.
Yeah, Sarah Beth or Alyssa probably would be taking that bullet, but... So yeah, there are, I think, paths, but right now, assuming Britni goes, which is 100% going to happen, the out that I was referencing was, at this point, Azza potentially would throw Britni a sympathy vote, and it would be 7-1. If the other 4 non-cookout members could, in the next 2 days, realize the cookout is a thing, come together as a 4, secretly, all 4 of them secretly agree to flip the vote, and also simultaneously convince everybody that they're voting Britni out. So the 4 of them vote to keep Britni. Azza, thinking it'll be 7-1, also votes to keep Britni, and it's 5-3. That is the one insane hypothetical where Britni stays, right? Okay.
Yeah, it's just so unlikely.
It's not going to happen, but I just want to put it on the table, right? Because people have talked about it, and it's people online have talked about it, obviously.
I will believe in production rigging if this plan somehow comes out of nowhere. There is no shot that Claire would not tell Tiffany that she wants Big D out. There's no shot Derek X wouldn't tell Chada, right?
Chada, yeah.
There's no chance that would happen. You know what I mean? The cookout is so well positioned in terms of covering their bases and fooling their +1s, So it would no. I would say I would call the biggest shenanigans if that happened.
Right. No, it would definitely this is fan fiction level inventing a plan where a flip can happen, right? It's not going to happen, but that is the out. That is the one scenario where Britni can theoretically stay, right? Yeah. But after Britni does leave this week, the cookout is going to have a 6-4 advantage. So even if, with a Claire or Derek X HOH, with the roulette wheel not screwing over a Derek X or Claire HOH, with the veto comp not screwing over a Derek and Claire, a Derek X or Claire HOH, even if they were to be able to take out a cookout member next week, they're still going into the final 9 with a 5-4 advantage. So it would have to be that, followed by somebody like Derek X winning the coup d'etat, flipping the coin correctly, right, and then correctly then executing the coup d'etat on the week after. It would have to be that, back-to-back with that. And if that happens, and 2 cookout members go out back-to-back in the next 2 weeks because of that scenario, then we can start to talk about maybe a cookout member won't win this season, right? But other than that, I think that a cookout member is going to win.
Agreed. 100% agreed.
All right. Anything else? I have a question. Well, what do you want to see happen, Brian? I'm curious because this is kind of a perennial question that I've kind of grappled with because on one hand I like most of the cookout and I think that the best players in the house are in the cookout. I think that Tiffany, Chada, and Xavier are the top 3 players at this point. And I think that, they would all make very good winners for the season. And I obviously want the cookout to succeed from a historical perspective. But I'm also a messy bitch who loves chaos. And I don't want the next, 3 or 4 weeks to be, kind of boring and rote. So I'm kind of of 2 minds as to how I want this to go. I'm curious how you feel.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, those 3 are the best players. And the way I've kind of rationalized, it in my mind, this was going to happen with those three players probably in another big alliance,
Yeah.
and it was going to be the same thing just with other people. So at least we get like a historic moment if we're going to have like the big alliance kind of steamroll down to the end. You know what I mean? I just feel like it's so hard to not have this happen on American Big Brother. And so if it's going to happen, I'd rather it be the cookout than just another version of like the committee or, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Chad, on that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I would love my winner pick Kyland, but I am the same
Right,
boat.
of
I
course.
just want the most entertaining and chaotic things to happen. You know, I would love to see, a cookout member sitting next to a non-cookout member. Like, could you imagine if we somehow get like a Xavier Derek, X, or Kyland Derek X, or Kyland and Xavier? Like, that's going to be such an interesting toss-up jury vote if it's two big names. Because if Derek X is sitting in final two next to a big name, like, we're going to be asking how the hell did he make it through there?
Yeah.
And how the hell did he not like take a go with him? So I don't know. I just want like the most interesting outcome to happen, and I want the cookout to explode, but I also want my boy Kyland to survive. So it's tricky.
Well, to be fair, right now, the consensus target at the final six is Kyland in the cookout. So.
Yeah, no, I'm probably screwed.
Kyland is the person who is benefiting the least from the cookout at this point. But Kyland is not great no matter what at this point, because he's also burned his non-cookout allies except for Sarah Beth. So, the cookout is still probably his best path anyways, which is funny. I do think that the cookout at this point is probably most people's best path, because Tiffany has correctly changed her mind to not wanting Xavier in the final three with her and Chada, and instead is trying to bring Ozzy to the final three with her and Chada, which is vastly better, vastly better idea, like by far. So yeah, I definitely think that there's way more outs for most of the people in this alliance, and you could probably say for most majority alliances on average, anyways. Even outside the historical significance. So what I would want personally is I want them to like have, some sort of like good fight on the way there. Like I want there to be like a random Derek X HOH or Claire HOH, or a random, Derek X wins the coup d'etat.
Sure.
But I want to see them navigate that and see if they can, kind of like mindfuck them into doing the incorrect thing, or how they would navigate losing somebody and seeing if they can make it to the final five then. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, where I want them to succeed, but I don't want it to be like a total steamroll. I want there to be some intrigue to it.
Right.
So that's where I stand. Anything else?
No, I think we covered it.
All right. We'll be back next week to talk about the roulette wheel of justice or fate or whatever the fuck it is, of random nomination, and probably we'll be talking about Claire eviction, but we've thought we're going to be talking about a Sarah Beth eviction heading into both of these past 2 weeks, so you never really know at this point. Chad, where can people find you online?
I'm on Instagram at ChadleyJP and on Twitter at ChadPerry25. Should be right here.
Yep. Brian?
You can find me on Twitter at @theFakeBMar. That's BMARR. If you're somehow not sick of hearing my voice at this point, we have a whole channel called Wicked Good Sports where I do almost daily videos over there about sports topics. So I don't know necessarily what the Venn diagram is, but you can find me, you can find Chad on there talking about the Patriots, and I'm working hard on it, having a lot of fun. So I'd appreciate it if you checked it out, and I appreciate if you subscribe to this channel and that channel so we can get over 100 on both, so that I can make them custom URLs instead of just youtube.com/ a bunch of random characters.
Well said. You can see that Brian and Chad have Dolphins and Patriots gear on from the Wicked Good Sports videos we filmed before.
Yeah,
this
we
podcast.
just filmed right before
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, you can find me online on social media at Ben Sharon. You can follow the main channel at WG Everything on Twitter, at Wicked Good Everything on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and our main YouTube channel on Twitch at Wicked Good Everything. And this channel is our podcast channel, Better Radio, and this is the Have Not Room on all major podcasting networks. And with that, we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening, everybody.